We are in the middle of a technical revolution. There was a time when people made machines to make manufacturing clothes better, and we're in that revolution for knowledge work. I felt like there needed to be more investors who just nerded out on tech. I think the biggest unlock for me personally is it's really simple. I use for like half of the stuff. And it buzzes and it says, something, Elon tweeted something. But then my phone just starts blowing up. It's like notification after notification. And I'm like, what is going on? When I do play with Claude, I noticed like this one weird trick that makes it so much better.
Hey crew, what is going on? Today we have DD Das with us today. Very excited to have him on board today. We are going to be talking not only about his builder hat, but also his investor hat, how he's evaluating different companies. But the coolest part, which I love and I'm excited to share with you, is he's actually going to screen share and he's going to show us how he builds with Claude computer use and MCP. So let's jump into it. So DD, you're a builder and you're an investor. What are the cool people or what are the smart people in AI talking about right now?
I think the one question on everybody's mind is, how far does this go?
Like scaling or just?
I think scaling is more of a tactical thing. It's just how good can these models become? Do we get to a world where this solves problems we could never solve ourselves?
Yeah.
I think that's the frontier. Because when people talk about AGI, it's this amorphous thing. I love to tell. Exactly.
You know what blows my mind is that us as an industry, we don't have a solid definition of intelligence that we formally rely on. It's wild that we're still arguing about what is intelligence. It's like a weird side product of this whole kind of revolution.
I was telling a buddy yesterday, it was like, if we asked somebody 4 years ago what AGI was, by all practical purposes, we're there.
We'd probably agree that you open up literally GPT 4.0, start chatting, and you're like, well, yep, we're here.
Yeah.
Okay, so how far does this go? So it sounds like you're talking about the application side, like value providing, right?
No, well, there is the value side. I'm less concerned about that. Obviously, as an investor, I concern myself about that. As more of a technical nerd, I just think about how good can these models get? Like, they still have flaws today, right? There's still limits. You have the ARC prize and everything. There's limits to what it can do. But what are those limits? How far does it go? And I love the AlphaZero, AlphaGo analogy. We'll see a world, hopefully 2025, where these models, you give it a general task, it'll figure out the rules, it'll figure out what it needs to do, it'll take some time, it'll take as much time as it wants, and it just gets superhuman level intelligence on arbitrary tasks. And in some ways, depending on how far you want to take that, I think that is reasonably close to AGI.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. So that sounds like that's your builder hat definition of AGI, which is pretty cool. So while we're on this topic, I got to ask about your investor hat of AGI. So how do you approach what the next 5 years are going to look like from an investor side?
I've only been investing for a year. The reason I wanted to get into investing after a 10-year career in engineering and product is because I felt like there needed to be more investors who just nerded out on tech. There's a lot of investors who are really good at what they do, analyzing businesses, but I wanted to be that voice of like, just show me what's cool and show me what's possible.
Yohei comes to mind.
Like he's fantastic.
Builder. Like, it's so cool to be like, here's my pipeline, here are the tools I built for myself, and here's how it's actually providing value.
Exactly. I love that. Exactly. So as an investor, I also take like at least 50% is that view, which is just show me what's possible. And we'll figure out a way to make it work. We'll figure out a way to make money. That's much easier than groundbreaking technology. And then the other 50% is, how do you take what exists today and apply it in useful and meaningful ways?
It's also nice because then you can call bullshit on a lot of the tech when you need to.
Oh man.
You can just like call them out and like ask real questions.
I was literally, I don't want to name the technology. Maybe I can name the technology. I was talking to a couple of other investors the other day and they were like, I had this pitch and these guys said, they do like RAG, but better. And they threw all these fancy terms at me. Like, what do you think? And I'm like, look, I feel like that's every pitch, almost every other pitch I've had for the last 3 months. And when it comes to things, especially that are hot like AI, there's going to be a lot of snake oil sales. And it is pretty important to call BS on a lot of these things.
Well, so I get a lot of pitches myself too. And one of the easiest ways to go through it is don't tell me what your tech does. show me the value, or show me the customer is paying for it, or like just show me something that's an output that comes from it. Because it's hard to bullshit value. Like that's proof of work almost right there.
True. I would argue that it is still, it's the reason investing is especially hard with AI is you can bullshit value. Like if I've seen so many startups, 1 million ARR, because, CIOs and CTOs are saying, go buy Gen AI tool.
Sure.
Does that mean they created any value yet?
The revenue's there in the beginning, year one, but the renewals may not be there. And even further than that, you dig down into the user metrics, the intention for engagement and all in activation. It's like, well, if that's not even there either, then you're going to get yourself in trouble. Okay. So I love the question, how far does this go? What are the obvious gaps that are limiting us going further from an AGI perspective?
There's a couple of different ways to break that down. I think let's talk just about text models. I look at text models today and I'm like, okay, well, this is good for a lot. I use Claude almost all the time.
Nice.
And I've played with all the other models too, like O1 and Llamas and everything. And what I really want to know is, okay, I've seen, people have all had this comment is, when you use it for a very specific task, like a task that has a correct outcome, an objective task, it goes pretty far and it can amaze people, but it doesn't go 100% of the way. And I love to call this like the full self-driving problem, where it's kind of easy to get a demo of full self-driving to kind of work in most situations. It's really, really hard to get an actual full self-driving vehicle that can do everything in real roads everywhere. And let's just take, say coding, for example. That's one example of a very objective thing. You can also take math. You can also take any other form of logical reasoning, biology, which combines memory and reasoning. And I think about those things and I wonder, like, okay, we're clearly at a gap. People love Cursor, but there's also some people who are like, okay, Cursor is awesome, except I hit a wall. I can't do beyond a certain thing, and I don't know what went wrong.
Imagine how entitled or like selfish those people must be to think that, oh, this AI is not good enough to do my job for me. You know what I mean? It's just funny that they're critical of AI when it's like literally so helpful for so many things, but no, because it's not throwing you a touchdown at the very end of the end zone, that you're giving it a hard time.
Oh yeah, well, humans are infamous. I think Louis C.K. of all people has this great joke about how people complain in flights and they're like, guys, flying in the middle of the sky. This is the most incredible thing that could ever happen. Like have some, be thankful, be grateful. And so I think about that too, obviously, but we also want to think about the frontier and what's possible. And even when I've been coding with Cursor and things like this, there does come a time where I'm like, damn, it did a lot for me. But now I kind of wonder, there's clearly something it can't do, no matter how much I prompt it. And it goes like 5 cycles and it's just not working. And then I'm in this weird spot where I don't even know where to look. It's generated like 10 files, 500 lines each. Like, if I was writing it myself, I would know how to debug this. Now I don't.
There really needs to be like a vocabulary word for a shared feeling of, I just had the AI generate a ton of stuff, and now there's a bug, and I have no idea where it is. I don't know what that word is, but I hear people talk about that all the time. We need to come up with a word for it. I have a hypothesis that GPT-4 can do almost any task as long as it's sufficiently scoped down.
Absolutely, and we'll maybe get to this later on, but I love this that anecdote because I play with computer use all the time, and I wish I could do it with GPT-4 and all the O1 stuff as well, but I just don't. Like, they don't have the computer use version yet. But when I do play with Claude, I noticed like this one weird trick that makes it so much better, and it was a really simple trick, and it was exactly what you said, which is I just went to Claude first and said, here's my high-level 3 prompts. You, Claude, have to now give instructions to a computer to break this down into tasks. And then I feed that huge prompt into computer use and say, now you do it. Huge improvement.
One of my, when I work with clients and we talk about prompting, one of the most common problems I see is that they stuff too much freaking stuff inside the same prompt. They want 5 tasks. I wanted to make a mini little tool, and it sounds like we have the same thought. It's like, feed in a prompt and output what are the individual prompts you should actually be getting from your big one. just scope it down even further. Because then that makes evals a lot easier too. Then you know where it's messing up.
It does. And they call it meta prompting, and I think it kind of alludes to this like fundamental CS thing, which is everything is solved by one additional layer of abstraction. And in this case, it's just on you to build that layer of abstraction, and then give a prompt that gives you more prompts, and then do it.
That's exactly it. On the investor side, you're seeing a lot of startup pitches come through. What are the trends in the past, let's call it 3 months? Not like the beginning stuff, not the 2023, but what's the last 3 months look like from the investment side?
Well, so a lot of people are talking about agents, right? And agents are one of those other words that people are like, what does that really mean when you say agent? And so when it comes to AI companies, let me sort of break down the field. Sure. There's foundational companies. Yeah. Foundational companies can be tough because sometimes you're really asking the question, are you really trying to compete with people with 1,000x the money?
And what are some examples of these?
Well, a good example is actually this company, Descartes. Okay. They bold, brilliant founder. It's just one of those guys, and as an investor now, I've learned this. Like, just trust your instinct. You meet this guy, Dean, I think his name is, just whiz. Like you're like, oh my god, like this guy's so smart.
It's almost like you're backing the person. Go get the idea.
Yeah, you're almost always actually backing the person. But some people just have this energy where they're like, this guy is a genius, and he was one of those. Descartes taking a problem way out of their league, which is this idea of generative gaming. So, it's hard enough to generate good images. It's hard to do it real time and then consistently. So what the question to ask is, you have a game which involves thousands and thousands of game designers engineering different parts of the graphics, how things behave in that game. What if you could just throw Gen AI at it and just have each pixel just show up and travel in the game? He has no business doing this, given that he's like kind of a kid and it's with a small team, and these are things that like Google can't do, and OpenAI, now Google has a thing that does this, OpenAI can't do, Anthropic can't do. But that was a beautiful one. That's foundational, and that's great. You have other companies. There's a company called Cartesia. Cartesia is a company doing a foundational model for audio. They came definitely after 11 Labs, and they had a different approach to it. And so good, reasonable outcome so far.
11 Labs is crushing it right now too. They're freaking shipping and building right now a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so foundational companies. All right, what are the other trends we're seeing here too?
Then you have the companies that are very clearly on the application side that are doing workflow automation, I like to call it, but that's a really boring word. The way I would think about it is we are in the middle of a technical revolution. There was a time when people made machines to make like manufacturing clothes better and other things better. We're in that revolution for knowledge work. And the question is, what machines can we make? And we're calling those machines agents, but this is everything, and people love to like take the extreme side and go like, well, my job is not automatable because it's so smart, but like, there's clearly jobs on the other side which are dumb and boring and no one wants to do them. And a lot of them really involve, look at this Google Sheet, look at this Excel, look at this PDF, get this data, write this data here, send this data to this person, look at a response this person sends you, then do this. That's most jobs. And moving stuff around. And if you have a job that's regular enough, you can kind of automate that today. So a lot of people doing automations there. And that can mean voice stuff. That can mean pure text. And
are we talking about vertical AI? Or are you talking about like the Lindys and the Zapiers, like the horizontal?
In this case, I think most of the ones in this category are pretty vertical. Because, at least at first, because you have to start with a way to say, hey, company, I know you have 100 people doing this job. We think you don't need that, and we can do it for you. That's kind of the high-level pitch.
It feels like there's an arbitrage opportunity right now for just going and selling AI plus your industry. Like, people will get over that eventually, and that's going to get diluted, and already is starting to get diluted. But if you go to a law firm and you say, hey, I'm making an AI lawyer, they're like, great, I need one of those, without even knowing what the heck it is.
There is this idea of, or this phenomena of people buy tools that overpromise and then underdeliver.
Totally.
And it doesn't work a lot of the times. But on the other side, I've seen insurance, healthcare, finance. There are a lot of pretty tedious industries, a lot of industries that have back offices, especially where you just labor that you don't want to pay for, basically. And so you're like, automate that away and let's move forward as basically to be grandiose as a species and not have to do dumb work.
We can move on. We can move on to other dumb work.
Yeah, we move on to other dumb work. Every generation has dumb work.
One of my favorite consulting books, I forget what it's called, but basically one of the main lessons is there's always a number one problem. Once number one is solved, well, number two gets a promotion to number one, right? So there's always going to be dumb work. There's always going to be interesting work. It's a big long cycle that comes from there.
True. But that, but to your point, like there's a whole thing of a workflow automation. Like how do I automate people's jobs, assist or automate, whatever, people's jobs and make it a little bit easier to do. The third sort of category I will touch on is, it's very hard because there's a big long tail of AI startups, but especially you asked the last 3 months what I'm seeing more of. I'm seeing a lot more companies really talk about this idea of, I'll take two.
Yeah, totally.
One is the idea of what they call AI SREs, is a common bucket of things that people want to solve, and I'll get to what that is. And then the second one is also in a semi-related space. It's just programming agents, and that's not like that's a 3-month thing. It's been around for a while, but in the last 3 months, the evolution has been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
To see.
Well, and there's a cursor competitor coming around now too.
Yeah.
I mean, I love competition, so I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, it's Cursor's doing really well. Who's the competitor you were?
Windsurf.
Correct. So it's awesome to see. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Okay, so 2 categories. So first one, SREs.
SREs, tons of companies doing various versions of this. And I say SRE, but it's also like support is kind of included in that, technical and non-technical support. The idea being, look, I have a problem in the company. Code breaks in production. Things go wrong. That is money on the line, especially from a big company. Like you can do the math. Every hour can be like tens of millions of dollars, and it's kind of crazy that right now the best thing we have is we send a guy. Like that's the resolution is a guy goes and looks at it and tries to figure this issue out. And I've done that at Glean and at Google. It is one of the most nerve-wracking things you can do as a software engineer, which is like something's down in production. There is time on the line, and there are literally petabytes of data you can look into. Like, which dashboard do I look into? What do I check? What do I check next? What do I query for? How do I fix it? When does the release go out? Like, your brain's going bonkers. And this could be 3 a.m. in the night.
You can ping, and it's like, oh boy.
It's crazy.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
So it's crazy. So it's a really bad, hard thing to do. And there's ways to make this easier. And there's like a couple of companies that are doing this pretty well. There's Resolve, there's a company Traversal, there's a bunch of these other companies trying to do this. Super interesting sort of category of problems, and just to me. And then the last one, like the one I was talking about, is just coding agents.
Nice, yeah.
There's just so much more stuff we can build.
Just so much more, and it's so cool. It's a place that's ripe too, because everyone talks about code is easily verifiable. Does it work or does it not, right? The hardest part is still just with the planning piece. And do you get the intention right? And can the human adequately express their intent to the coding agent in the first place?
Exactly.
It's amazing. One of the side thoughts I've had is I bet outside of just AI in general, like epistemology as a study, like the study of thought and the study of how knowledge works, must get such tailwind from AI, the AI move that's happening. So people are thinking so much more about, how do I express language? How do I formulate these thoughts? How do I think about planning? How do I think about communication? All that wouldn't have happened unless we had these text-based LLMs that we now have a financial incentive to really dig into how we're dealing with these things.
Absolutely. I think it's incredible where we are in the world.
Cool. So let's move on to the builder side.
Yeah.
So what technologies are you personally building with right now that you're excited about?
Right now, I think the biggest unlock for me personally is it's really simple. I use cloud computer use for like half of this stuff.
No joke.
And I think with the caveat, there's 2 caveats actually. There's a version of cloud computer use that came out. They wanted to do it safely. Anthropic is all about safety, and as they should be. Like, I don't think this is something that you should just let everyone willy-nilly go and run amok in their computer. But look, I like to take some risk. And so I cloned the version that they have for Linux. And You have to do a couple of edits to that, and I can go into as much detail as you want, and I'll show it to you later if you want to. But you can make it work on your actual Mac, and it makes things a lot better. That's caveat number one. Second thing that you can do is I realized over time that as cool as this is, Claude Computer Use did this really cool thing where it can control your mouse and view your screen and then take an action. Yeah. But as cool as that is, it's kind of the most lame part. In the sense, this is something that takes a human a second, and now it takes this 20 seconds. And it's really, really frustrating when it does all this cool stuff and then it gets stuck trying to find a button and click it on your computer. So when I prompt it and I do a couple of alterations, I just say, can you not do that? Like, just try to stick to the command line. You can pretty much run anything on the command line, pretty much. Just stick to that. And I felt like the progress has been incredible.
That's cool. That's very cool. So is Claude Computer Use, is that going to be the product, or is that going to be the platform that other people are going to build really cool products on top of?
It's unclear. Like now they have MCP, which is I don't want to speak for Anthropic, but I feel like MCP is the version of safe Claude Computer Use.
Well, so can you define what is MCP? Could you define it, and in layman's terms too?
The way I see it, and this is probably not doing justice to everything it can do, is MCP is a way for you to safely say, hey Claude, you can use these tools. I can give you some memory. You can go use these tools, and I customize the way you can do things with Claude. But it's very dev centric. It's not really consumer facing ready.
Because there's a whole spec that comes with it, right?
Thing like So I don't know. I don't know where Anthropic goes with this, but I do know, coming back to the startup thing, it's a big thing that startups are thinking about. Computer use, how to use things like computer use to automate more kinds of tasks. Like the first era of automating tasks was all browser based. And the general way it would work is scrape the DOM, everything on the HTML on a web page, and then try to figure out various hacks on what I can click on. And you could think about that for 2 seconds and go like, that's a pretty shitty strategy, because that's not how humans work. It would be insane to read thousands and thousands of lines of like HTML code and then figure out what to do on a page. The whole point of the page is you see something and you do something. And computer use makes that a lot better because you have the vision angle. But it's slow. So, but there is going to be a time where the vision latency comes down and you can start doing actual actions on pages that get to automating a whole other boatload of tasks, both on web and on your desktop. So it's an exciting sort of high-level technical thing that startups can do now.
One last question before we dig into computers. We'll pull our computers out here. So there's an open question on if the future of automation, what's the interface for an AI type of thing with, call it third-party software? Will it be more like Claude Computer Use, where you're actually interacting through the UI? Or is the API layer going to get built out, and that's where the automation is going to happen? I think the jury's still out. What's your opinion on which way it's going to go?
There have been a couple of startups I've seen trying to sort of have various approaches to how that layer should look. So there's one called Composio. And Composio is a way of saying, there are a bunch of tools that are out there for you to use. I'm going to toolify it for you so that you can go and the LLM can see a prompt and understand an API spec of, say, GitHub, and then figure out what to do. So you can think about it almost like documentation, technical documentation for LLMs. And then I will teach an LLM how to use the tools that it has. I will keep it up to date, and you just feed it to the LLM, it can use my tool. That's one angle. There's another company called Anon, and what Anon does is it's more, like, almost think of it as the Plaid for APIs, which is like the same way you do bank authorizations via a protocol with Plaid. This is like trying to extract authorization out to the user, but let an agent act on behalf of you. And
the funny part about Plaid is it used to be just via scraping, and now it's like done proper. And that's almost like the metaphor for how this is probably going to go too.
Maybe. I still think tool use has not got mainstream adoption yet. So it's TBD where that direction goes. Obviously, a lot of startups looking out for it. A lot of enterprise companies that do a good job there, but end users still kind of haven't done it. Most end users are still just kind of talking to Claude, talking to ChatGPT, and going like, hey.
What the heck's going on right now, right? They're just waiting for more builders to go build stuff to go use it from there.
To me, it's crazy. Maybe there's a good aside there, but you step out of the Silicon Valley bubble and nobody knows what's going on.
It's almost baffling sometimes because when you spend so much time on AI Twitter and you're literally in San Francisco, in the heart of the city right now, it's hard to get away from it. And you go to these meetups and it's just like, oh my goodness, I'm so far behind because there's so many other people that are so far ahead of me. But like you said, you step outside of it and it's almost like you're speaking different languages when it comes to all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like a socio-cultural element to this too. I don't know if you've been seeing this, but like a lot of the youth of the world today, like Gen Z, I don't know what Gen and Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
There's like this hatred of AI in a huge way, where it's like it's not cool to talk about it, to use it.
Interesting.
It's the most weird. Like I feel like an uncle now even saying this, but I'm like, dude. When I was a kid, all new tech stuff was cool.
It was really cool.
Nerdy, but cool.
Yeah.
What is that reaction? And maybe it came from the world of art, where I know AI's had a really, really negative reaction from all artists.
Sure.
But now it's seeped into just AI at large. People are just like, ugh.
Yeah. All right. Well, whatever. Their loss. Cool. Well, I tell you what, let's do some building. So, Didi, one of the cool things is that a lot of the projects you have surround or revolve around diagrams. And that's cool because it's not only very pretty for humans to look at, but it also actually helps AI understand the flow of something a little bit better that language may not express in the first place. So, why do you love diagrams so much?
I think diagrams are just way more expressive. It's bringing structure to unstructured data. And I think the caveat is, look, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to get things wrong. But just the fact that I'm a huge book nerd, and I love reading books, and it was always this like thing in the nagging back of my mind where I'm like, I wish I had a character diagram because my memory is terrible. Like I watch Game of Thrones, and every episode I'm like, well, who's this? Who's that? Why do they know them?
Yes.
And I don't want to read a Wikipedia again. I want to see the relationships.
That's cool.
And that kind of inspired that viral Harry Potter tweet back in the day, where I was like, let me just throw all of Harry Potter at. In that case, it was Gemini for the context window, and just get a graph out of it, get a diagram out of it. So maybe I can show you that. That's one, and another one I'll talk about, and we'll do it. Is getting diagrams from code. It's the literally biggest problem in the world when you look at a new code base. Is it's not the time you spend reading it; it's the time you spend not doing anything because you're overwhelmed.
Sure.
You're looking at it, and you're like, nah. I don't know.
That's because it's just a bunch of text files. It's like, where's the insertion point? Where do I go start?
Where do I start?
Even, right?
Yeah, it's crazy if you think about it. Where do I start? And so we'll do a demo, but what I did was I would like dump the entire repository into a plain text file, put it into an LLM and go like, hey, tell me what the code looks like.
Love it. Beautiful.
So let's start with the simple one.
Beautiful.
We will, what do you want to summarize?
What would be cool? What's something relevant?
Okay, I have a good one. Let's start with this. You can see my screen, right?
Nice. Yes, I can.
It's funny that you mentioned the Gorn thing,
one,
because I think I might have that already downloaded.
Oh, that would be nice.
Okay. Cool. Let's see what we can do here. This is all live. I have not done anything before. Have not prepped for this, and I think that is going to be the beauty of it. So where are we?
So you like working in the terminal most?
Yep, I am a purist, I guess they would call me at some point. So I'm going to use, I like to use Z. So sorry cursor guys, but this is awesome. So this is a VTT file. And what this means is I use this tool called YTDLP. YTDLP not only helps you download YouTube videos, but it helps you download transcripts. So I'll show you
It's just the transcript that comes straight from YouTube itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got it. So what that did was I generated this previously with Claude. If you look at this code, it is basically trying to take out the timestamp artifacts, which take a bunch of tokens. And it gives me some plain text. And this plain text is not great, and there's some repetition, but it'll serve our purpose.
It'll get you there.
It'll serve our purpose. So let's see if this one fits. We're going to put it all in. Oh, great, it fit. And I'm going to say, draw a graph. I know mermaid is the default, but I don't like using mermaid. So draw a visually aesthetic graph. This is what I just like to do.
There you go.
As a dot file.
Why aren't you a fan of mermaid, out of curiosity?
I think mermaid is too simplistic, and I'm just like more old school. And mermaid comes from something called dot, and dot or GraphViz is what I used to use in college, and so I'm just more used to that.
Yeah, there you go.
As a dot file,
For those that don't know, Didi was a hardcore engineer before investor.
I know.
We actually had our first conversation when you were still at Glean a long time back.
Yeah,
Cool.
I was an engineer. With subgraphs demonstrating the relationship between various things that are spoken about in this podcast.
What about prompting techniques? Do you like the think out loud? Do you like tips, or what's your take on those?
I wouldn't say like I'm a pro prompter.
Sure.
Like my advice is don't think, do.
Just go try something out.
Just go try something.
Yeah.
You'll figure out in the end. Like a couple of these things that I've done, I've just figured out over time.
Sure.
So here, it generated a bunch of stuff. Now what I do is I will go and take this to online GraphViz, paste it in, and
wow,
look at
just one shot too. That's nice.
Yeah, it's just so cool. So we have some personal background, hearing impairment, social isolation, reading focus, talks about rabbit holes, nice. Pattern synthesis. And it gets you somewhere.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty nice.
This is just such a nice, like, better way to look at a long body of text. Yeah. It just makes so much more sense.
Just makes it so much easier to do. And we'll do a little bit more on this because I think this is a question I get asked a lot, which is, how do I get out of this context window limitation a little bit? Okay. So I like to do, this is one of my techniques, my prompting hacks. Assume all of these nodes and edges exist. Keep going. Add new ones and make it exhaustive.
And so you wanted to double click here.
I just wanted to go deeper. I think this graph was a good start.
Yeah.
And let's see where it can get me. And so it does regenerate some of the boilerplate here, but it's going on and on and on. Oh, look, we have some GLP drugs, some China, some great stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to copy the whole thing. I'm going to copy just the subgraph thing, and let's see if it worked. So go back to this and, oh, look at that. And it got even more complicated.
That's nice.
So
that's cool.
So now it's like, okay, you're like, if you're a hyper productivity guy, you don't have that much time, you want to listen to this podcast, but you don't have 3 hours.
Yeah.
Download it, and now you just know.
It'd be so nice to have timestamps for each one of these and just click on it and
Great.
Just listen to it.
It's funny that you ask. It's like, let's say I'm interested in AI and intelligence. Can you time? Oh, well, it can't do that. It doesn't have the timestamps right now.
But it would be really cool.
It would be really cool.
Yeah.
Look, in a world where we could fit the timestamps, and I've done that before too, which is like, just give me quotes with timestamps.
Yeah.
For these areas that I like.
That's cool. So then, other than just looking at the diagram, will you use that diagram schema anywhere else for like any other problems? Like, does that make it its way to an input to a prompt for you?
I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah. One example I talked to another person on this interview series called Arjun, and he wanted to judge how well his support people were following the call script that they were instructed to do. So he first started with the diagram flow of the call script and what it should go here, if this, then go here, blah, blah, blah. You give that, pair it up with a transcript, and then the AI LLM as a judge will judge how well they followed that script.
I've seen some voice agent companies do that, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. So that's on the diagram side. Let's go into computer use.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to, and again, this is my fork of Anthropic computer use. Totally unsafe. Do not use it.
Okay.
Yeah, do not use it. It can do all sorts of weird stuff. One thing that went wrong when I was trying to make this do something was they started a rogue process and just created like 1 million files in a directory, which then stopped loading because the computer just went bonkers. So let's try to do something here. What I'm going to do first is we're going to go to Claude and we're going to say, instruct a computer to, and you know, there's some people who like to save prompts and they're like very meticulous. Sure. I'm not that guy. Instruct a computer in as much detail. Do not write the code now. We have to tell Claude to do that because it loves to write code. To do the following. Create a directory called dev/ we'll call it Greg Demo.
Nice.
And in that directory, create an, you tell me, Greg, we can interact.
For an app-wise?
We're going to create an app with a front end and a back end. Give me some ideas, like what kind of stuff do you think? And I can push back, I think it's too complicated. But
for the front end and the back end. Let's just do it on brand topical. No, it's kind of lame. I was going to do like VC inbound, blah, blah, blah. How about like simple restaurants in San Francisco?
Okay, I'm thinking about that one. APIs will be tough because you have to do...
Oh, you want to pull some like real data too?
Oh, we could. I'm trying to think. You know what? I'll do one now.
I don't know how complicated you want to go. I want to scrape OpenTable to know when reservations are opening.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's this one spot in San Francisco that every time I look, it's always booked, and I'm never there early enough.
You know what? It's not going to be as visual, but let's see how far we can go.
All right, let's see how we can do that.
In that directory, create an app to scrape OpenTable.
And I have the restaurant.
Reservations in San Francisco to find. Do you have a restaurant in mind?
I do. I just put it in the Riverside Studio chat. It's called Four Kings San Francisco.
How do you spell that?
Just four, like the number 4.
To find Four Kings availability, and let me. No, I'll make it interesting and let's keep it simple for now. Tell me when it opens up.
Nice.
And so let's see how this goes. And it might say something about.
Okay, so you're making the prompt right now that you're going to go then give to the computer use.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
Yeah.
Man, this is
oh my goodness,
this is a lot.
I don't even know. This is a lot. This is a lot. So yeah, this is gonna be fun because I have no idea if this is gonna work.
We'll see how far it goes.
We'll see how far it goes.
Okay.
Would you like me to proceed with them? No, I don't want you to proceed. Try to use, this is another one. Try to use command line only as much as possible and build an MVP.
Nice.
Boom. So now, okay, let me open up what's going on here. This is how I typically look at it. Okay. It is trying to, it's creating all these files. It's trying to create a config. Mm-hmm. It's trying to download all the requirements for Python. This is where it's running at. And then real quick, let me just go into that demo. But I think for a lot of people, if you do prompt it the right way, absolutely. Yeah. Like I have a friend, one of the people who work at one of the companies that I named before.
So let's pause there and just bring it up for a second. You had a tweet that said everyone thinks this is an exaggeration, but there are so many software engineers, not just Fang, who I know that literally make 2 code changes a month, and they're getting paid $200,000 to $300,000 a year. It went viral. It popped off. You listed a name of companies. So who's this friend at the company?
There's many friends at many companies. Wow. Andre Karpathy tweeted back at that, and I love like using other people to validate that this is a real thing. Yeah. And he's like, people brag about this all the time.
Yeah, there's entire subreddits dedicated to it.
Yeah, Overemployed is an entire subreddit dedicated to it. So I think like for me as somebody in the software engineering community, I don't think this was like a de novo type thought. Everyone knew this happened. Sure. I think outside that community, maybe people didn't know as much. Maybe the executives didn't know as much. And now maybe with this tweet, some people do. Without question, there are people who don't do anything. Okay. And is it their fault? Yeah. Is it their fault? No. I mean, they're not. Sometimes.
Well, it's where incentives are, right?
Incentives, and the incentives go up the chain, right? The managers aren't giving them work. They don't have anything to do because the managers don't expect them to do anything. And managers at any big company never have incentive to get rid of you. Yeah. They always have, I have a follow-up tweet about that. They always want to increase headcount because that's the only thing that gets them promoted. Sure. So no matter how bad you do, they have no reason to get rid of you. Sure. And look, the nature of work is you're not going to have work for 5 people. Let's say you're a team of 5. You're not going to have consistent work for 5 people consistently. The problem happens is when you have basically no work for no people, and then you're like, I can't, like, I'm a manager. I can't tell my manager that I don't have any work for these 5 guys. So I have to then pretend that I have work so that I keep my job. And then it's just this thing goes up the chain and then nobody does anything. But to get back to it, there was a follow-up I'll mention in that thread where somebody said something, well, what does this have to do with, like, does AI have anything to do with it?
Sure.
And the answer was no. Like, the people who are doing these jobs have no idea what computer use or Claude or ChatGPT. They're practically not even, they don't care. They're in Mexico, they're in Hawaii, they are vacationing all the time. So,
That's so crazy.
but when you think about, and I can give one example of a couple of friends that work in a job like this, they were telling me, I'm like, dude, when you do work, what do you do? And he was like, we maintain the service. It's a big Java service. And like, I just had to do like one dependency upgrade once a month.
That's
And
so
I'm like,
crazy.
A, that's ridiculous. And B, let's talk about that dependency upgrade.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend on it? And he's like, oh, I spent like, dude, it was a hard one. I spent like 10 hours. And I'm looking at him like, okay, can you show it to me? Show me what you're doing. He was a buddy of mine, and we met, and he pulls up his computer, he was showing me a little bit. I'm like, dude, why are you doing this manually? That's insane. You're like trying to resolve Java depths, and I know that this is insane.
It's like going to Stack Overflow or something.
Yeah, he's basically Googling a bunch of things to try to figure out how to use this dependency system that he does not know how to use. I'm like, dude, you can run this through like Claude, and it will fix it for you.
Yeah.
And his response was, well, they don't let us use AI at work. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a pretty shitty response because you're the person who's gonna have to do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Not me. And so that's kind of where it is.
All right. And so where are we at now with this thing?
Let's see. This is a problem that happens where, here's what happened. It ran the scraper. The scraper ran and it blocked the thread.
Okay.
It waited 4 minutes and then it timed out.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's the work in progress with it.
So we'll see whether, and there's a log. So there's a little bit of a log, and it said,
Nice. At least we're at the right URL, which is good.
Started
Timed out while
reservation.
loading reservation page. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
I mean, they're probably pretty good about scraping.
Yeah.
If any open table engineers are listening to this.
So it looked like the error was it was a timeout, and then it schedules the check every 5 minutes, and therefore computer use timed out.
Schedules the check every 5 minutes. There you go. Nice, man.
But look, it wrote a lot of code. It somehow wrote this like notification sending code, which
That's crazy. Just
like
send me
writes
an
an email to you.
It's like sometimes when I look at AI code that's like this, I just get overwhelmed. It's like, man, I don't have any mental bearing or anchor points to lock myself into this. And it makes me a little nervous sometimes. But I tell you what, when you click run and it works, it's like, well, all right.
It's true. I feel a little bit better because I like sometimes understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example now that while we're at it. And I know we're at the time, but I can go to 130 flat, so don't worry.
Beautiful.
Here, I will do another one of these, and actually, you know what? Let me do a simpler one.
Okay. And while you're doing that, I would love to hear about what's the stack you're using right now. Where do you like to deploy? What's your DB? What's all that stuff?
I keep it really simple. Yeah. This was true of when I did this at companies, which is do what you know. Yeah. Don't do what you don't know.
Sure.
Sometimes I want to learn something new. I'll learn something new. I know Google Cloud really well. Nice. So I do Google Cloud auth. Yep. That's one command after run on my command line. And then I say, go deploy it with Google Cloud. I ask computer use, tell me what to do.
Yeah. It just does it. Nice. So GCP.
GCP, and then for what else? What other?
Let's see. I mean, GCP. You're using Zed. You're using a lot of Cloud.
Oh, I use Zed. I use Cursor too. I use a lot of Claude and computer use. Sometimes when Claude doesn't work, I will go to O1 and I'll try to like go back and forth and get different answers. Yeah. I use Gemini when I need long context. Gemini is pretty useful at that. Yeah, that's kind of my stack. When it comes to languages, there's another really cool project that I was working on where in Rust. And so sometimes I'll use Rust when I need it to be super fast. But I'm mostly doing stuff in Python, and then if I do front ends, it'll be in React. Cool. That's mostly it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Love it, man.
Real quickly, I want to tell you about like the coolest example of something I learned when usually it's one of the hard mental constructs with AI is you don't know what it can do. So there's like this unknown problem where I know what I can do, therefore I ask it to do things that I know that I can do.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can't do, therefore I can't ask it to do that. But there was this one example where I asked Claude, again, meta prompting to our point, I'm like, give me some random ideas. And I just got out there ideas. And then I took some of those ideas, and one of those ideas was get it to make a song.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, well, that's stupid because obviously computers can't do that yet. But I'm like, okay, well, what would happen if I asked it to do that? And this one blew my mind because I didn't know it was possible. And I'll show you this example.
Sure.
That you could create waveforms from scratch.
Just like with code.
Like with code.
Yeah.
And
yeah, look at that.
it just built that from absolute scratch using a thing called Socks, which is a library I had never heard of and I did not know. And it downloaded it and it used it. And this is a really simple one, but I've gotten to get some really, really crazy.
That's wild. Okay. So say we were going to take the open table example we just did. And it's like, okay, it works. It's cool. It's there. You're about to package it up and you're about to put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
You're very good at this. What is the mental process you're going to think, okay, here's how I package it up and everything up until you click send or post?
Okay. So step number one is GitHub repo. Usually you can get computers to take care of most of that for you. So put it on GitHub. A couple of general sanitary things, which is get some documentation going so people know what it's done. So you can just spit out all the code and say, now create a README for it. Get a nice README, whatever. That's step one. Step two is I think about like videos, and there's two ways to do this. There's like the video of the process, which has a certain audience, and there's a video of the output, which has a certain other audience. Sometimes just a picture works better than video. It's pretty laborious because what I have to do is QuickTime, screen record. I'm not super fancy with it. Do a screen recording, run the entire process back, literally like load it into iMovie, but sometimes I use some other video software, and like clip it up, like make it faster.
Cut the ums, cut the pauses.
Yeah, and I usually do no audio for this because that's a whole other thing, but I just want to like show the demo because it's usually for Twitter, not YouTube. Cut it up, make it 4x faster if it's a computer use thing, and export. Boom. I use an app called Typefully to schedule tweets. So I'll put the video on. You never put a link on your first tweet. You put the link in the thread. So I link to my repo in a follow-up tweet. And then I just compose. Like, I'm like, okay, what do I and how do I want to talk about this? So one example of that was, say I built a thing on my friend's computer, which is, I always thought this would be a really nice concept for people to understand, which is, everyone talks in SF especially is like, make me a bot that swipes on Hinge. And iPhone screen mirroring came out, computer use, and like put two and two together, let's make this happen. And so that was a cool one. And so take the whole video, get computer use to do it, and then package up the demo, get rid of PII, boom, tweet, and then go.
So you have an idea, you go and build it, you share it, and then it seems like it goes viral every other post. In fact, when we were doing the pre-call for this one, I said, I want to talk about your viral post. And you said, which one? And so it's like, yeah, you have so much good content out there. So how do you build so much? Like, what's the secret behind it?
Firstly, I just want to say, well, I'll tell you the story of how I got into Twitter because I think people misconstrue a lot of the online stuff, and I hate like the word influencer because that's not what I try to do at all. The reason why I'm able to output so much is because I think I just genuinely love building stuff. And in the past, one of the biggest constraints, I think mentally, now that I introspect about it, was, what's the point of me building this? No one's gonna see it and no one's gonna care. It's just gonna be a little project that sits on GitHub with no views, and I can tell one buddy of mine who cares and nobody else gives a shit. And now that I have an audience, I feel really like genuinely grateful that it lets me go like, I'm gonna go build it because at least some people will see it. And it kind of brings me, and that's kind of all I wanted to do. And
that's so cool.
The reason I got into writing online in the first place was because, I mean, the story is, me and a friend were out at drinks. We were having a great time, and I gave him an idea. And he looks at me and he goes like, dude, that's a terrible idea. And I'm arguing, and I'm like, what are you talking about? No, it's a great idea. And he kind of does this flip on me, and he goes like, look, and this is before I really tweeted, but I did write online a little bit. And he's like, I trust your judgment. If you, sober, can go online and write about this publicly, I'll believe it's a good idea. And I'm like, oh, well, that's an interesting thought right there.
It's literally just framing the idea.
Exactly. And then I realized that gap between you having an idea and thinking you're awesome versus pressing the send button is so big for so many people.
It's so true.
And I realized that was stopping me from doing a lot. I thought I had great ideas, didn't put them into production or put them out there.
Sure.
And the second thing is, everyone does this on the internet. Like, we go into rabbit holes, we learn things, but you don't remember much.
Yeah.
And this was a good way I found. I promised myself I would go online, I would write one thing every day.
Nice.
One thing that's somewhat useful to other people that I learned.
Sure.
And that's how it all started. And I just promised myself to do that. And it gave me a reason to go and learn stuff.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Instead of aimlessly exploring, I would say, I learned a thing, here's a thing. That's kind of how it evolved. But then obviously,
it goes from there. I was just listening to the Darkesh Gorin interview, and I think Gorin said that one of his North Star metrics for himself is to maximize the number of rabbit holes he goes down. So it's literally just getting in flow state into an esoteric topic and just going and having fun with it. So when you said rabbit hole, it made me think of that. One thing I would love to do to inspire people to share more here. So going from the journey of having no audience all the way up to hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter, I'm sure there's a lot of cool serendipitous moments that happen along the way. Maybe somebody famous reaches out, or an opportunity presents itself, or maybe a new career thing. What are some of the cool things that happened along the way of your journey that are due to having a bit more of an exposure?
Oh, this is my favorite one, which is I was on the first date with the girl I've been seeing now for a while. And I remember we were driving in my car together and across the Bay Bridge, going to Oakland from SF. And it's the first time we ever met. And my phone starts buzzing, and it's like I see a notification, like I'm driving and the phone's up there on the dash, and it buzzes and it says something, Elon tweeted something, but it wasn't the normal Elon tweeted something. It was, I couldn't tell what it was. I wasn't really looking at my phone. But then my phone just starts blowing up. It's like notification after notification. And I'm like, what is going on? And probably shouldn't publicly admit this, but then I put my car on self-driving and I'm like, oh, what's going on?
You're like, babe, I gotta look at this.
No, it's because my phone's blowing up. And I saw an Elon thing and then it blew up. And I looked at it and it's like, Elon had retweeted and written something to me. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? And to her, it's just like meaningless. She's like, I don't know what you're so obsessed about, but I have friends reaching out to me going like, congratulations.
Oh my goodness.
And obviously like I'm a huge fanboy of a lot of things Elon does. And so that was one moment where I'm like, damn, like cool. The richest guy in the world knows I exist. Yeah. That's kind of like nice. So those are the positive ones. Like, the Elon is, I think we've had 10 replies and stuff now. And then Paul Graham, Mark Andreessen, a bunch of these like pretty esteemed tech people. But I think it's worth you take the positives with the negatives. And I think the hardest part about writing online is that there's going to be times people tear you apart. And that's happened a ton of times too. And
what percentage of the energy, when it ends up blowing up like that, what percentage of the energy is negative that comes up?
It depends on the post, and I think there's some threads where you're like, okay, 90% positive, and there's a couple of people who are kind of dumb and they're saying like nonsense, and that's fine. You build thick skin to those things. The hardest part is when you get a full blown cancel thing, and I don't think there's anybody I've met who has some scale online who hasn't had at least one of those. But when it happens for the first time in a big way, it messes with you, man. Like, as much as you want to say I have thick skin, you're just you're like looking at people on the street and going like, do they know? Do they know? Do they know that I'm a villain online to millions of people? And you get over it, but that's happened a couple of times too. So, and I will share that there's so many younger people, especially that I've met, who literally have had one of those happen and have stopped posting online for years. Wow. It kills people, energy and motivation.
And what's the advice to them?
For me, it's the same advice. And in real life, when people say you care too much about what other people think of you, they don't really care. It's kind of that. It's like, people aren't going to say shit. Just keep doing you.
Just keep on doing it. And that's the other thing too, is like the algorithm wants to promote good stuff. And if you post something and it's not good, don't worry. Nobody's going to see it. They're only going to see the good stuff.
There's only one caveat, which is like take feedback. So
Sure.
if there is something you're actually doing wrong,
Yeah.
go like, okay, well, what am I actually doing here? But in many cases, that feedback is, just keep doing what you're doing.
Didi, this is fabulous.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for chatting.
Thank you so
today,
much,
man.
Greg.